You are the chosen one. If you do not have the balls to take on these nuts, then maybe the war is finally lost.
I was more consumed with my needs than the needs of my children, and that made me a really selfish father. And for that, I'm sorry.
Look, I don't give a about none of that shit, all right? Oh, also, Cornell wanted me to give you this. He said he hopes you'll be proud of it.
Ooh, he's thick.
Yes, indeed. Adult Swim, The Jellies, which stars one of the voices of the Jellies, who's on my podcast right now. He was also in a little movie called Benchwarmer.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. How you feeling?
I just destroyed that porta potty, but I'm feeling better.
Who did this?
No! Sorry!
And that is Earl Skakel, star of stage and screen, comedy stage, of course, Roast Battle and the movies, the TV shows. We'll talk about all of that. Earl, hey, thanks for doing this here on the Check Your Brain podcast with me, Tony Mazur, if you folks are just checking it out here.
Thank you for having me. And to beat the trolls to the punch, sorry about my camera angle. It's just, I'm looking at upgrading my background. But right now, this is the best optimized Wi-Fi angle. So it actually could be worse.
I like it though. I like the Earl, you're a big Rat fan, of course, and a lot of the 80s metal. And I see you with the t-shirts over at the Comedy Store, which, by the way, go follow Earl on Insta, follow his Patreon, all that and everything, but follow him on his Instagram. It's hilarious because you have the old photos, you have your hockey jerseys, you're at the hockey game, then you're shirtless, then you're on stage, then you're with Roddy Piper or somebody, and very entertaining. I'm always a big fan of the Earl Skakel Instagram.
I do my best. It's a young person's business comedy, so I'm a little I'm playing catch up, but I'm like the in-shape Bert Kreischer. Think of me as that.
Yeah, so go check out Earl, by the way, this is his Patreon. Go sign up for Earl's Patreon, and the Bonzo Berry Daddy Man. Yeah. So let's get the numbers up. Get my numbers up too while we're at it. But Earl puts out good content, and I might have to be number 11 here for the book.
You don't have to. That's how bad I am. I'm telling you not to join. I will say, people ask me, okay, we've heard you call yourself Daddy Man, so we get that. What is the Bonzo Berry level? What does that mean? Bonzo Berry was a character in my favorite episode of Miami Vice.
Oh, okay.
Where the other guy from Perfect Strangers, not Bronson Pinchot, but Mark. I'm drawing a blank. Mark Summers, maybe. He played the character of Bonzo Berry. So it's just a very obscure random reference.
Mark Lynn Baker.
Yes, I'm sorry. And he is a fence in the episode. And it's one of the few episodes where Izzy and the Noog Man was played by maybe the greatest what if in comedy history, Charlie Barnett. So Charlie Barnett
he was one of those street performers back in the day.
Yes, and he's really the reason I had Jeff Ross on my podcast, because Jeff knew him. He would sell out, I think it's called Washington Square or Washington State Park. It's probably
Washington Square Park. It's right by it's right in the Village. It's right by NYU and the Comedy Cellar and everything.
Yeah, I mean, to show you how well regarded Charlie is, Chappelle is his mentor, or I should say he was Chappelle's mentor. Mm-hmm. And he's just an iconic, legendary comic who was battling a lot of demons, and he was supposed to be on SNL. He went through all the audition process, and then I think the story goes, someone told him that the last audition you have to read off of cue cards, and he couldn't read.
Ooh, yeah.
So he just bailed on the audition, and Eddie Murphy got the part. So, it's just always, I love, I was just having this discussion, what they asked me what my greatest what if was in sports. It was Ron Lyle, the boxer. So I love having those what if type of conversations.
Mine was Dooku Kim. I thought he was going places.
I mean, he was. I remember watching that fight live on, I think it was CBS against Ray Mancini.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching the Ron Lyle. I always try and tell people about this fight because for some reason it's not talked about that much. But Ron Lyle and George Foreman, it's the greatest heavyweight fight ever. Just prime George Foreman, and Ron Lyle had just gotten out of prison for 7.5 years for murder. And while he was in prison, he was stabbed, almost died, had like 36 blood transfusions, survives, gets out of prison, and arguably gave George Foreman and Muhammad Ali their toughest fights. So it's like, what if he wasn't in prison for 7.5 years?
Man, I miss the heavyweight fights. That was in the 80s. You basically, what you did when you had a Mike Tyson fight, for example, is you got all your buddies together, you pooled your resources and everything. It's like, okay, it's $99. Everybody throwing a 10. We'll drink beer, and we want to see how quick he ends this. It's like part of the draw to going to see Tyson in his prime was it's clearly going to be a first round knockout, but how fast is it going to be? Is it how many punches? You're putting down prop bets to see how many punches it's going to take. And I miss those days. I mean, they were fun. They were fun. Now are the heavyweights now in UFC? Is that what's going on now?
I mean, I couldn't even name you one heavyweight boxer right now. Wilder. Well, I guess I could Wilder and Fury.
Ernie Shavers.
Ernie Shavers, another one of my favorites, and I know this isn't a box. Sorry, when you have me as a guest, we get sidetracked.
I love all. This is what this whole podcast is. This is the Inappropriate Earl on the Check Your Brain podcast, where we just talk about things. This is just what it is. We crack the mic, and it's let's have a random guy who played with the Green Bay Packers in 1987. That kind of stuff. I love that kind of podcast.
We're like the only, well, along with Ray DeVito, like the three people in the podcast wars who have so far remained unscathed.
Pretty much.
But, it's funny. I was just talking about 70s boxing with someone. I think it started with Ron Lyle, and you may not ever see that era ever again. Like you had a prime Ali, a prime Foreman, a prime Frazier, and then the second tier guys would have been champions in any other era. A prime Ken Norton.
Yep.
I don't know if I would say a prime Ron Lyle, but just because of his situation, but a Ron Lyle, Ernie Shavers, Jimmy Young, who was another talented heavyweight, and then
Larry Holmes.
Jerry Corey. Yeah. Larry Holmes, I put in the next category, that next era.
In the 80s, yeah. Yeah, with Michael Spinks, Leon Spinks, all those guys.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for Larry Holmes, and I always felt bad for him, he just didn't have he didn't have a rival. Like, he was just that good. And he's really only known for his fight with my all-time favorite, someone I named a dog after, the great Randall Tex Cobb.
That's correct.
He's known for that fight. And it's really not because of what he did, which was batter a man for 15 rounds, but just because Tex Cobb wouldn't go down. It was just it was Rocky. So I always felt bad for Larry Holmes. And he was in that transition period too, because as you said, from the 70s and going into that new era, you were getting some of those young guns by the time you got to the 80s. And Larry Holmes was just he was the bond in between, I thought, the two eras. Because I saw that one documentary, I forgot what it was, that Ali fight where Ali has the mustache and he's clearly out of shape. He's not, I mean, it was a joke. But the same thing happened 10 years later where they looked at Buster Douglas. They're like, oh, this is a joke. I mean, Tyson's going to beat him. They're in the Tokyo Dome. Put all my money on Tyson. And for those couple of people are like, you know what? I got a couple of bucks. I'll throw it at Buster Douglas. I've seen stranger things happen. And sure enough, stranger things did happen there. Yeah, I mean, Buster Douglas, I have a signed boxing glove that an ex got me for a birthday present. It's one of my prized possessions. He was another one. I think he got that money, and I think a $24 million deal. I think it was a 3-fight deal. And the first fight was with Holyfield, and he clearly didn't train. He's another what if. I don't know if he liked boxing. They often say about the wrestler. I think I can do this without interrupting the show. One of the great wrestlers of the 80s, Sid Vicious. People are like, what if? Why wasn't he bigger? And he didn't like wrestling. He was in it for the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Buster Douglas just liked boxing. He liked it. Like, he actually liked the training, but he didn't love it. So, because talent-wise, he was very good. I mean, he was much more than just the Tyson fight. But of course, we either remember that or the Holyfield defeat. Kind of like Razor Ruddock.
Mm-hmm.
He was a great boxer, but he's remembered basically for his 2 Tyson losses, which I guess were his biggest fights. But he was a great boxer. But just,
I remember a baseball player. You probably remember him, played for the Pirates back in the day. His name was Jeff King, third baseman. He was a guy, he hit you 25 home runs, hit about 260, 270. Not a bad ball player, a nice mustache. And, you look at those Pirate teams where you had Van Slyke, Bonilla, and Bonds in the outfield, and Jose Lind, and Doug Drabeck was their ace. And then you had Jay Bell at shortstop and Jeff King at third. And you go, how did those Pirates teams, how did they not advance? They were clearly talented. They could have beaten that Reds team. They could have beaten one of those Braves teams. And that's when you start looking back at some of those guys that just weren't completely engaged. And Jeff King was one of them who said, yeah, I didn't really like playing baseball. It's like, yeah, I liked it growing up. I was talented at it. And they said, hey, you should pursue that as a career. He's like, all right, I guess I'll do this. So you wonder if he was a little bit more passionate and engaged, you never know that's another great what if.
Yeah, I mean, the Ultimate Warrior, going back into wrestling, he even admitted, I didn't really like wrestling. I was in it for the money. And so you go, what if he was liked it a little more than he? I mean, who would like the world of pro wrestling? Constant travel, beating your body up beyond belief, especially if you look like him. You have to maintain that body. It's one thing if you're like, say, King Kong Bundy, where he probably didn't have to work out. He was just a big fat dude. But like when you're paid to look like the Ultimate Warrior, or Rick Rude, or Sid Vicious, even Hogan back in the day had a great body. Like, I can understand why these guys and girls didn't like doing it. But, I mean, Dave Parker is he's my all-time favorite baseball player.
Oh, we've talked about them. Yeah. I said I gotta text you his number. I gotta get you his number so you get him on the podcast. Dave Parker, the Cobra, who's on my podcast. Unbelievable ball player. Name me a better overall player. I mean, you could probably name higher batting average like Bill Madlock or whatever in those days, but name me a better overall player from 1975 to probably 1982 than Dave Parker. And I don't think you can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't a 30 for 30, but MLB, I forget what their 30 for 30. It's like a 30 for 30. Like
it was called the Cobra at Twilight.
Yeah, they which is basically their 30 for 30. I didn't realize he had bad knees in high school. So the fact that he was so dominant and had bad knees, but I think that cocaine stuff was the cocaine trial, I think in '84, kind of tarnished him. But there's no doubt he should be in the Hall of Fame. Like, that's insane. Like, and no offense against these guys, but Ted Simmons, Scott Rowland, recent inductee, Harold Baines, who I know is a great DH, but like Dave Parker was just like, he was a 5-tool player, and the pressure that was on him to take over after Clemente, basically. And even his Reds career wasn't horrible.
No, he was runner up in the MVP, I think in 86, I believe. One of those years, he was I think it was the year, oh God, forget, maybe it was Roger Clemens won the MVP that year. And he was like it was like that year. I know it was American League, but it was a weird time where it's like Dave Parker has this massive resurgence in his career playing for Cincinnati. And then he is a very solid DH for Oakland at the end of his career, wins a championship with them in '89. Yeah, I mean, you think about I don't know if it was the weight, because he also gained a lot of weight and he had the cocaine and the bad knees. And then you're playing on that turf. I mean, it didn't matter if you were in Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. That was just green. That was green concrete out there. And he's playing on there in right field all the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, and he wasn't horrible with Milwaukee or even his very brief career with the Angels. Some guys when they're at the end of the road are like, oh boy, they should retire. But I will say before I forget, I once had to kick out Bill Madlock at the gym I worked at because he was behind on his dues. And it's probably the most embarrassing thing I've ever had to, because I was a fan and like he still looked like Bill Madlock. This was in like 90 maybe at the Sports Connection in Santa Monica. And I'm like, hey, Mr. Madlock, you can't work out until you're paid up. And he just left. He was actually pretty nice, but like, it's just embarrassing.
Yeah, he was, well, and then, yeah, some of those guys like Parker, you mentioned with the Angels, I actually got a chance to talk to Dave Parker about this because there's that classic photo. Like, I don't think there was a ton that was memorable except for one photo, and it was he met Muhammad Ali in the clubhouse. He's there in the clubhouse with Ali. There's a great picture of him. I think he's like sparring with him. And of course, now Dave Parker also has Parkinson's. He's been really afflicted by it. So, but he was a hero to him. So it's an amazing story hearing about that.
It's pretty rough, the documentary, even if you're not a Dave Parker fan, to just see this mountain of a man, like who probably didn't work out a lot. Some guys are physically gifted. I remember I used to work with this black dude at that gym. His name was Willie. He never worked out a day in his life, and he had a bodybuilder's body. He never worked out. Like his bicep peak was like a baseball was in his arm. No, I was like, what do you do? What do you do? 21s with the curls, and like, no, I don't work out, dude. So Parker was like that. He just like, if you look at, especially his Pirate days, and even really his early, I think it was against the Mets where the Reds and the Mets had a pretty big brawl. And I think you could tell Parker and Strawberry were the two alpha males on the field. And it's like, Strawberry didn't have the greatest body. He was just lanky, but you could tell no one was messing with Parker. And this was a pretty heated brawl. And just Parker would just walk from, there's probably like 10 clusters of people, you know how those things look in the back of the 80s. And Parker would just go from circle to circle, calming things down.
I think that might have been the one where Tim Tuffle got hit in the back by like Rob Dibble or something. I'm not sure.
I'm trying to remember. It's a very extended brawl, and it is on YouTube. The whole game is on YouTube. Of course, I'm not helping anyone with no information, but it's like a 3-hour, it's basically the whole game, and about maybe 2 hours in, the brawl starts. And it's just fascinating to see the difference in eras, where today that would have been broken up really fast. And like,
that's had a chance to go out in front at the top of this 10th inning. Couldn't do it. A hit now would win it for the home team. The throw, he's safe. And now look at this. Davis at 39.
Damn, John Milner. That's a name from the past. There's Parker. Look, it's like 3 guys to hold him back.
Tell you one thing, you're barking up the wrong tree when you go after Ray Knight, but look at Eric Davis. He still wants a piece of the Mets third baseman.
By the way, that's another what if is Eric Davis.
Yeah, I mean, he was a SoCal guy, kind of the next big thing. And, he had a decent career. You know, the Reds had a few of those guys. Like Cal Daniels was another one who was supposed to be like the guy. I mean, Barry Larkin had a pretty good career.
Chris
But he
Sabo's
had
another one.
But yeah, Larkin had a tough. You know, he talked about Parker basically replacing Clemente. Larkin had to replace Dave Concepcion, who maybe not nationally was known, but Cincinnati known. Like that, those are pretty tough. Hey, this is who you got to replace, a local legend.
There's a stat I saw about Eric Davis. I think it was from a 162 game stretch between like 87 and 88 or 86 and 87. Eric Davis had like 47 home runs and 100 stolen bases. It was incredible. And his downfall happened in the World Series. He was trying to make a catch in Game 4 of the 90 World Series, and he rolls over. I think it might have been like a Willie McGee, or I don't know who hit the ball, and it was short, and he landed and lacerated his kidney. And after that, it just was one problem after another. And then he had cancer. And so whenever I hear about comeback stories, Eric Davis, when he's playing with Baltimore, had a colostomy bag while he's playing. And he's playing in the playoffs for Baltimore in '96. And he's dealing with colon cancer at that time. It was incredible what he was able to do.
Yeah, I mean, the body is in some ways, you know, I'm not putting myself on Eric Davis's level, but I had no ACL for like 12 years. I didn't know it. So, you know, what your body can do sometimes is pretty special, you know.
Absolutely. Well, you know, you were mentioning about people who were kind of being afflicted and kind of transitioning from sports to more Hollywood figures. Did you see Valerie Perrine? You see what's going on with her now?
I haven't, but I used to be her neighbor. So what is going on with her?
So she's been it seems like she's been on death's door. I got to look this up. I'll show it on here, but Valerie Perrine was, I mean, she was like kind of I think it was like the Kathleen Turner, like the thinking man's it girl back in the day. And, you know, she was in Steam Bath. She was in, of course, the Superman movie. And there's a story about, I guess she's fighting for her life right now. 79 years old. And so it's weird when you know, like you see Dave Parker throwing out Jim Rice at third base, or gunning down Brian Downing at the plate in the 79 All-Star game. Valerie Perrine was all over the place, and, you know, she was in a lot of sex scenes and everything back in the day. And then there's photos of her now. She's just basically on her deathbed right now. Yeah,
I lived, well, I don't want to dox her because she still might live in the area, maybe, in the area right below Cedars-Sinai. So it's not quite Beverly Hills. It's not quite Hollywood. And she was my neighbor at the building next door, and she still was beautiful for an older woman.
Parkinson's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff is, you know, who knows what, you know, if you lived in the 70s and the prime of the cocaine loving days, and I don't know if, I'm certainly not a doctor. You know, Dave Parker probably did a lot of blow. I'm assuming Valerie Perrine had a nice run at Studio 54 and places like that. You know, maybe there's something to it, you know, with cocaine. Yeah. And, you know, even Michael J. Fox recently said, he was a little vague. He was like, yeah, I probably did some things that quickened my decline. He was kind of basically saying I might have partied a little bit too much. But she was beautiful, and always was so, you know, I know you wanted to have me on for my like random celebrity stories, but
yeah, the old Hollywood stories.
But she's like exactly, I think, the story you're looking for. Like, I would just walk my dog late at night on the street called Burton Way. Burton Way basically turns into Santa Monica Boulevard. And one night there's this beautiful older woman walking a black, I think it was a black lab, maybe. And we just started talking, and I didn't let her know I knew who she was, but in my head, I'm like, oh my God, that's Miss Tessbacher from Superman 2. And I never let her know. I'd see her for years. I never once said, "Oh my God, I'm a big fan." I try not to do that. Sometimes it's hard not to, but yeah, I mean, I would guess she probably still lives in that area because it's, she was a weird girl. Like she probably made enough money. Like she's a celebrity, but I don't know if she ever had that one breakout role where she could buy a mansion. So that area is, I think, filled with a lot of people like her, successful actors,
Consistent work, but not the blockbuster.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of another actress.
Like a Bo Derek.
Yeah, like famous but not rich, but not poor either. And you in that area, I think back then I lived there from like 88 to 92. My rent was $1,270 for a 2-bedroom. Now that's that same building where I lived. I would guess the rent there is now $3,500 to $4,000.
Wow.
For the same set. So yeah, you definitely have to be working something to live there. So that's why I like the Trader Joe's. If you go into that Trader Joe's, which used to be a disco, which is always, if you've ever seen the movie Thank God It's Friday.
Okay.
The disco that was based around is now Trader Joe's. You'll see celebrities like her there, like Lorenzo Lamas. I don't know, just some random cast member from The Fall Guy. So it's kind of funny.
I heard when I hear about like these old Hollywood stories that speaking of grocery stores, I think it was either like a Ralph's or a Vons or something, and Dolores Hope would be there. And now Bob Hope obviously basically owned half of California. It was like him, Fred McMurray, Bing Crosby, like they owned all of California. And she would be going there and buying like a can of creamed corn with a coupon. It's like you have more money than God, and here you are clipping coupons at a Ralph's just so you can try to get some quick $5 worth of groceries.
I mean, I find that the people with the most money are the cheapest. I know a guy who was a billionaire with a B. I mean, this guy, very wealthy. He had illegal DirecTV. Because for him, it was about the funniness. Like, it was almost like a gimmick. Like, yeah, I can afford to buy 100 DirecTVs, but my friend gave me an illegal. This is at the time when DirecTV, you had like the little credit card you had to stick in there. It was like now it's all done digitally through wires, but back then it was basically you paid and you got a credit card that you would stick into your machine. But the big scam was somehow these credit cards were pretty easily cloned.
Oh, yeah. I bet.
Probably why DirecTV doesn't have them in use anymore.
Well, with your obviously your last name and growing up in California, were you young, but you saw like the amount of people who were coming out from New York? Because when you thought about Southern California, that was where the movies were. But TV was usually filmed in New York, and stand-up comedy, you had Johnny Carson was in New York, and then he makes the trek in the early 70s out to Burbank, and then everybody else starts going out there, the Jimmy Walkers, the Steve Landisberg, and it just became one after another of everybody saying, all right, yeah, I guess I don't need New York anymore. I'm going out to California. Was there an area? I know that there was that house that's up on Hillcrest that's behind the Comedy Store where a bunch of comics stayed at, but was there like an area where it was like, this is where all the comics are living, like this apartment building or certain part of town like Los Feliz or something?
I mean, I would say a lot of people moved to Bel Air because Bel Air at one point was really just a hillside neighborhood. It wasn't, because that's where I grew up, but we got to grow up there because my dad built a home in the mid 60s when Bel Air was just a basically undiscovered, unchartered, just hillside, multiple hillsides. And then there was a famous Bel Air fire. And our home was literally one of the few to survive.
Wow.
So my dad was literally like on the roof with a garden hose. This fucking house ain't going down. And then it became what it is today. You know, I mean, I think my neighbors growing up in the 70s, Elvis was a neighbor. If you look up Elvis Roca Place, ROCCA, there might be some pictures of him. Very few pictures. There's one picture of him, and I remember because I would see this limo. It was the biggest limo I've ever seen in my life. I think it was a Cadillac limo, and it was gigantic. That might be it. I just remember as a kid going, wow, that car's bigger than most. So yeah, that's it might have been his last place of residence, so at least when he was in LA. And Harry Nielsen was my neighbor. One of the great memories of my youth is Harry Nielsen showing me around his it was basically the skeleton of what would become his home. And later I think Kelsey Grammer bought it and kind of remodeled it. But when Harry Nielsen had it, that was the first house I'd ever been in that had a basketball court in it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Harry Nilsson, of course, was with the Hollywood Vampires, where him and Alice Cooper and all of them, they would have that drinking club. And I think there was your initiation to get into the Hollywood Vampires was you had to outdrink the rest of the Hollywood Vampires, which was nearly impossible.
My dad was like an unofficial member. I mean, he obviously wasn't famous enough to probably be a full-time member, but he could hang. Like he could drink with Alice Cooper and Harry Nielsen and Mickey Dolenz, and I forget there was one other.
Was it Ringo?
I think so. So, you know, he was my neighbor. You know, Wilt Chamberlain, you know, James Caan, Stallone when he started making the big money in the early 80s. Kareem, of course, was so it was, you know, Bel Air was a hot spot. I would say if you weren't as famous as those people, you know, Santa Monica, you know, had some that was semi-cheap, not cheap, but semi-affordable, because Santa Monica, and I think there's still parts of it today, are rent control. So, you know, if you have some really older people who still live in Santa Monica, literally paying $300 a month in rent.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they die, their apartment or condo, whatever they're living in, will be jacked up to $3,500 the next day.
That's incredible.
So, I mean, it's nice if you're them, but you're also probably at this point 85 to 90 years old. So,
yeah.
You know, Culver City was another area where working actors would live, just because the studios are all mostly there. Burbank as well. The Valley's always been known as the cheaper place to live, but it's also 10 to 15 degrees hotter. So when it's like I live in West Hollywood, so if it's 85 in West Hollywood, it's 95 in Sherman Oaks.
Well, so that's where Brody would be. Brody was from the Valley, right?
Yeah, Brody, I think. Well, you know, Reseda is where he's most associated with, but he was all over. They have a really nice mural at a Starbucks he went to, which was more Studio City-ish. So yeah, Brody was definitely, as he said, 818 till I die.
That's right. Yeah, I went out to the Valley. Who's in the Valley? I went to because obviously I'm not a California guy, and I did touristy stuff. So I've been to California several times, but I had to do some of the touristy stuff, and I went out to I forgot the name of the but there's the two cemeteries that are across the street. One's the Jewish cemetery, one's the Christian one, I guess.
Oh, probably Forest Lawn.
Yeah, Forest Lawn. Or no, I'm forgetting what, I don't think it's Forest Lawn, but it's where Groucho Marx is buried there. I know Lenny Bruce is buried there. And there was a rumor, I forgot who, might have been Jimmy Walker told me this, said that Freddie Prinze used to bang Lenny Bruce's daughter, and that they went to his gravesite one night and fucked on the on the gravestone.
That might be Hollywood Forever Cemetery. That's where they do a really cool thing. It's kind of weird. They have movie night at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and they'll do like Boogie Nights, Scarface, iconic movies.
Eden Memorial, that's where it is.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's not okay, because Hollywood Forever is on I think Santa Monica. As you get towards, it's a little rougher part of town. It's like past Highland. If you're from LA, it's past Highland, but they have this great gigantic wall, and in season they'll do, like, I went there I think 2 years ago to see Blade, and it's kind of neat. You're in a cemetery, you're watching a scary movie like Blade, you're with probably 1,000 people, so it's fun. But there's so many cemeteries in LA. There's I'm trying to think the one where Lemmy and Ronnie Dio are buried. I think they're at Forest Lawn, and they're buried across from each other, so they're looking at each other.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned all these people that you would see at the grocery store, walking their dog, mowing their lawn, and you being raised in this, you're not really starstruck. You're like, oh, hey, there's James Caan. It's like, but people from Cleveland, Ohio, like myself, would be like, holy shit, it's James Caan. Now, you said there are times that you've been starstruck in front of celebrities. Who were a couple of those that you're like, wait, you live like right here? Like, I can't believe it. My name's Earl. Nice to meet you. Who are some my celebrities that were there?
I mean, it is weird. Like, I remember one time I was playing golf at my country club. My dad was a member at Bel Air Country Club, and I'm just on the putting green by myself, and because I was always good at putting. So I'm shitty at every other part of golf, but if I can be in like a pro PGA type putter, my score won't be that bad.
Just be a pinch putter. Just like, have everybody, like, you play best ball and I'll just play the short game.
Oh, I totally could have been. So I'm on the green, and you're just kind of lost in your own world because it's so pretty up at Bel Air Country Club, and the putting green is literally overlooking the city. So it's really unbelievable. And then I see these three guys get on the putting green, and I look up, and it's Ken Danico, defenseman for the New Jersey Devils, pretty iconic, 3-time Cup winner, Mark Messier, and Wayne Gretzky. And then I got so scared I started walking off. Now, this was before I really started having interactions on a daily basis with celebrities. And just then, as I'm about to reach the exit door, I hear this booming voice, "Skakel, get back here." And it was the GM at the time of the Los Angeles Rams, Don Klosterman, who's pretty legendary figure in the LA scene. And he introduced them to me all, and he was pumping up me by talking about how famous my dad was. This guy's dad killed a whale and was on Life magazine, the cover in the 60s, and they were impressed by that. So they started asking me questions, and I'm like, this is insane. I was probably, I want to say maybe 21, 22 tops, but this is prime Messier, prime Gretzky. So, and Danico too. I don't want to leave him out. So that was probably one of the few times I've ever been like, oh my God, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here right now. I've run into Cameron Diaz walking my dog, and she was like obsessed with my dog. And I was like, oh, that's just Cameron Diaz. Who cares? In LA, you see a lot of character actors. So like just the other night, I was in 7-Eleven on Sunset, and I see this hulking black dude, and he's the character actor Tony Todd. He's always the bad guy.
Yeah, I met him one time at the Hollywood Improv one night. He was doing a reading for a Kevin Smith pilot that I don't think got picked up.
Yeah, he's just, he's that guy, you don't know his name, but you know the face. He was in
Yep.
like The Rock and just I think Boardwalk Empire, just literally hundreds of movies and TV shows. I'm like, hey man, you play a great bad guy. He just looked at me and said, thanks, bro, and just walked off. And
Yeah.
Edo Ross, who is I don't know if I'd say legendary, but iconic character actor. He was in probably my favorite scene in Lethal Weapon. So he's buying cigarettes at 7-Eleven. You can meet some really cool people at 7-Eleven in LA. And he kind of looks at me and he goes about his purchase. And I just looked at him and I'm like, do you smoke? And he's like kind of looking at me like, huh? I'm like, do you smoke? Your lighter. The bulk of the heroin will be here Friday. If you try anything, you'll have to speak to Mr. Joshua. And he finally puts it together. He just ran off.
Yeah, that's the one thing is that when you get some of us Midwesterners who go out to LA or in New York and you run into a celebrity and it's just diarrhea of the mouth of like naming your credits or quoting your movies. And I think a lot of, especially the character actors, like, look, I'm just happy for the work. I don't even know. I read it one day. And apparently I got paid for it and you guys love it so much.
Yeah, I mean, Edo Ross is like, he's been a working actor for 40 years. So I'm sure he's over it though at this point. He just wants to do he's probably coming back from filming something. He just wanted to buy cigarettes and just be left alone. But, I have no shame when it comes to, even when I was on I'm Dying Up Here, now, of course, you're on a TV show, so you expect to like interact with celebrities. Robert Forster I believe he played Ari Grainer's dad in the show. And I think he was just in a few episodes, but at the wrap party, there's Jim Carrey over there. There's, Brad Williams, famous comic over there. And Robert Forster's behind me in line to get in. And it was at Canner's Deli, the wrap party. And I just looked at him and I'm like, hey man, you were a great bad guy in Delta Force. And you could tell like he loved it though, because they like to be recognized too. Like and especially if it's one of their more, like I would say most people remember Robert Forster for like Pulp Fiction and some of his other roles. Probably he looks so different in Delta Force that probably not a lot of people realize that's him. Because they did a really good job of making him look Arab in that movie, Palestinian. But I would see, up until he passed, I walked Lois all up and down Santa Monica Boulevard, and there is a restaurant that Robert Forster would eat breakfast at every day, reading scripts. So it's just stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was funny you mentioned that. I met Mary Steenburgen one time, and my buddy and I said we loved you in Ragtime, and she's like, "How old are you?" And at the time we were like, "Yeah, we're 28," and she's like, "Yeah, and most people your age either recognize me from Back to the Future 3 or from Step Brothers." And I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't really like Step Brothers, but I liked you in Ragtime."
Yeah, I mean, I think they like it when you acknowledge I don't want to say their least successful movies, but like. I was talking with John Glover, who's my favorite actor. I guess you'd say he's a character actor. He's been a working actor for 50 years. And when we first started talking, I wanted to not talk to him. He's probably most known for, 52 Pickup, which is how I became aware of him. And he's done a lot of, I think he's won Tony Awards. So he's a legit actor. And I wanted to talk to him about a clip I saw him on YouTube. I think it was the original table read for Karate Kid. And in the table read, he's playing the role of Sensei John Kreese.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if he was set, and I could totally see him because he is probably the best 80s villain. If you look at his movies in the 80s, he always played the heavy, and he just had this he played it with a little bit of campiness. So it wasn't like, it was just like almost like a used car salesman as a bad guy.
It fit for that time, for that time period of movies.
Yeah, if you look him up in the either 52 pickup, Mannequin with Andrew McCarthy. No, not Mannequin, Masquerade. I'm sorry,
Masquerade. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Or a great underrated indie film called The Chocolate War, which he played. It was a story about a boys' school, a Catholic boys' school, which I basically went to. So maybe it's why I like it a little more than someone who didn't go to a Catholic boys' school. And there's a chocolate sale, and he forces the kids to sell chocolates. And so he's a great bad guy in that.
Okay.
But he was like, how did you even see that in terms of the Karate Kid clip? And he was a little vague on if he was originally supposed to be John Kreese, but I guess it worked out for him and Martin Kove.
Yeah, I guess. And then of course, not only just you growing up there, but also being at the Comedy Store. This is the set list, or the list from the first time I ever was at the Comedy Store. And unfortunately, I'm like, have I ever seen Earl live? And every time I've been in the store, you're not there. It's an Earl free night, unfortunately.
That was, and let me see, September 27th. I was probably upstairs doing roast battle. So
okay.
I actually was there that night, but if you look at that lineup, everyone is working on that lineup today. Mark Ellis is tons of commercials. Argus Hamilton is a legend.
Argus, yeah, definitely.
Tom Papa, obviously. Sebastian, Doc Willis was with me on the Jellies. Jason Tebow works, Jessica Michelle, like every single. Rick Ingram's opening up right now for Chris Rock. So that's the crazy thing about the Comedy Store. Even though that lineup is filled with mainly unknown people, they all work. So, and unfortunately, Eric Myers at 12:45, he is no longer with us. So he did the Dwayne Haskins thing of getting hit on the freeway.
Oh yes.
So
just not in Fort Lauderdale.
He was a great hit. I think Eric got literally hit by a garbage truck on a Texas highway. But he was a great comic. So
is that what happened to Orson Bean? He was crossing the street and he got hit by a car. That's how he died.
I believe so. But what made Eric's was literally on the freeway. Or whatever they call them in Houston. I don't think they call them freeways. And then I'm going to show you this business card. This is not going to mean anything to anyone if you're not in LA. But this man, let me see. Sorry. Jay Lux is probably the most famous person in LA because he is. I'm trying to explain who Jay Lux is to most people. He probably, any lease sign you see in commercial real estate in Los Angeles, Jay Lux has literally 98% of them.
Really?
So even Tyler, his signs are everywhere. His signs are basically what his business card looks like. So like any abandoned building, you will see this in a poster-sized form. And he's so famous that even Tyler, the creator, was interviewed. It's like, the only person I haven't met that I want to meet is Jay Lux. So,
wow, he just is like an actor, but like a normal looking dude. And yet it's all over the place. Holy mackerel.
Oh, I can't explain to you. Like I was in Malibu the other night and there was I drove by a mini mart. Jay Lux sign for sale. You go to Hermosa Beach. I had a comedy show a couple nights before that. Jay Lux, so one night I'm at the Comedy Store. And I'm doing pretty well, and I walk back, and he's there. He's in the back seat with a beautiful woman. I'm like, he looks at me and goes, "Hey, you're funny." And I'm like, "Hey, you're Jay Lux." And it's like, so that's probably the number one celebrity in LA right now is this guy.
Wow, that's pretty. Is he a bigger celebrity than Scotty Bowers was?
He is like
That's a deep dive for some people. Go check out Scotty Bowers and where was that? Was it was a filling station or whatever? And it was like the filling station of the stars.
yeah. I mean, there's several places like that in LA where if my friends who just want a weird random celebrity encounter, they're like, where should we go? Where do they hang out? Celebrities don't really hang out. They're not hanging out at the liquor store. But actually on the corner of my street, Larrabee and Sunset, there's a very famous liquor store called Turner's Liquor. And it's literally almost attached to the Viper Room. If you go in there on a Saturday night, from say 7 to probably 1:59 a.m., there'll be some celebrity in there buying booze or dick pills or vape pens for weed. And there is a dispensary on Santa Monica Boulevard called the Artistry. And it's not artistry, but artist space tree. I've seen a lot of celebrities in there on the DL buying weed and whatnot. So it literally, you could go into any business around me, the pizza place, there's a celebrity there. Lance Bass owns 2 basically gay bars, but I mean, they're not technically gay only bars, but you'll see celebrities going into there to drink or to dance or whatever. The dog park. It's funny, I go to the dog park and my friend will try and put this over the rat sign, the tubes. Let me see if I can do that so you can see this better. The legendary 70s band, The Tubes.
Love
V.
them.
Wable. The singer's there every day with his dogs. So and you see a lot of reality stars, just because I'm in the area. I always see a lot of people from Vanderpump Rules.
I was gonna say my wife's a huge Vanderpump fan. So when we go out there, do we have to go to the restaurants or are they mingling elsewhere that we can find them?
They're mingling elsewhere. Like, that's a weird, show because Tom Tom's really only open at very random days. Really,
you have to look up when Tom Tom's open.
I mean, I don't know if it's a money laundering thing or the city. Someone told me the city pays for the rent and stuff. So Lisa Vanderpump's really not on the hook for the money. It's like Pump is open random times and then empty for 4 days straight. I do and Sir, same thing. I do realize that or recognize that when they're filming, they're open a lot more. So,
okay.
Or like tomorrow night, Vanderpump Rules is on, the new season, and Tom Tom's usually open. Pump is usually open. All 3 are open on the night of when either the show's on or they're filming.
Okay. Well, that's good to know next time we go out there then.
Yes, and they randomly will have an episode where there's stand-up comedy theme. Like, I was actually in the episode where they went to the Improv to see Kristen do stand-up. And
oh, really? Okay.
They knew I would. Well, here's the weird thing, and I'm not going to show it because I don't want to get you striked. So I'll just leave. I'll turn my phone backwards. So I thought, well, I'm going to be in front of a packed house, but I don't want to be on the show because reality TV exists to make fun of these people.
Yes.
And I thought, just in case I bomb, I'm not going to be shown bombing on TV. So I pulled out my phone and I had a joke about my dick pic. So I did that joke and I put my phone into all 3 cameras like this, literally, because I knew where the cameras were and going like that. So they couldn't use my set. I'm not as dumb as people think I am. So.
That's great, though.
So I got the benefit of being in front of a packed audience, but not being made fun of on Vanderpump Rules.
Well, I'm glad you could be passed at the Comedy Store and also work at the Improv, too. The days of the Bud Friedman, Mitzi Shore rivalry from the 70s is long gone.
It pretty much is. I mean, you can see certain comics at the Laugh Factory and Comedy Store, and some like the bigger ones, like a Steve Byrne, he'll play all three in the same night. So I don't think there's too much. I mean, the Comedy Store is the clear cut number one of those three. Then I would say the Improv and then Laugh Factory, but and now the Ice House, which is in Pasadena, they're back up and running. So
yeah, they revamped that place.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers owner, the Bus family owns it now, so they did not spare any expense.
AKA Jay Moore.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's why he's getting booked there again. And you have the Hermosa Magic Club, which it's smart to have clubs in these areas. Like, there's a lot of people in Pasadena or that surrounding area. They don't want to drive to Hollywood. It's a schlub. You got to take 3 or 4 freeways to get to this Comedy Store. So
you have Irvine, you have La Brea, you have some of those other places that are a little out of town.
Yeah, Ontario Improv I play frequently, and that's an hour drive for me. But you have someone who lives in Upland / Ontario. Like, you got to literally take 4 freeways to get to the Comedy Store, and they get the same acts for the most part. So it's there's no excuse to not get to a comedy club, because there are several in almost every area of LA.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about that. I tell people who don't go to LA is that you don't go to as opposed to where I'm at outside of Cleveland, that people go to downtown Cleveland. They go see a baseball game, a basketball game. They hang out. They go to see a concert. In LA, after 5 o'clock, you're leaving downtown. No one's staying downtown. Everyone goes out towards Santa Monica. They go out to Pasadena. They go to the Valley. They go West Hollywood. There's not a ton going on downtown, right?
Well, they are, ever since they built Staples Center, which now Crypto.com, they are definitely trying to invite people. It used to be a pretty rough part of town. I mean, that's where Skid Row is. And I know, I'm sure Ohio has a pretty rough area, and New York and Chicago. Really, every major city has probably a relatively area where you don't want to be in at night. But LA, I think, takes the cake. I mean, it is several tent cities, and it's frankly areas that you just don't want to be in after, say, 8, 9 o'clock.
MacArthur Park, just don't leave that cake out in the rain.
But Crypto.com, and it's with the prices that they charge now for tickets for Lakers, Kings, Clippers, concerts, parking's $30. They realize they have to clean up that neighborhood if you want people who can afford those prices to come in.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as bad. They used to be they used to have a downtown comedy club that Garrett Morris from Saturday Night Live owned.
Yeah, from the School of Hard of Hearing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember he's bringing me up one night, and he's really building me up, like, oh, this guy's the best. He's my favorite comic. And then he looks at me behind the curtain and he forgot my name.
Of course, yes.
So, I mean, they are. I'm surprised. I would bet within the next 5 years there will be a comedy club somewhere near. I want to call it Staples, Crypto.com, because there's a lovely area called LA Live, and I think it's the Clive Davis Theaters there. And
yes,
I think Russell Peters might have done a special there, and they have like higher end restaurants. So I would, I was at the Kings Edmonton, Game 4 last week, and I just kept walking around LA Live going, all these people in one spot. They're probably looking for something to do after the game, but they don't want to get in their car and branch out into areas that might be not the best. A comedy club would be perfect down here. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, last time I was there was actually the day the world shut down on March 11th of 2020, and I was went over on Riverside and went to the Bob's Big Boy over there because I love Big Boy. I don't know why. And then head on down to when I'm still Staples Center, and I went to go see Kings Senators. There were like 2 second to last place teams in a mostly empty arena. Then I went to go see Soul Asylum at a place called the Terragram Ballroom, and then I went to the Comedy Store. And I'm like, if the world's going to end tomorrow, and everything that we know is going to be shut down, I'm going out on a high note. Comedy show, concert, and I went to go see a hockey game. It was great.
Yeah, I think the last thing I did before the world just imploded was I saw Kiss. I think it was at the Forum, and I went by myself because my girlfriend at the time was working on a TV show. And I remember Paul Stanley doing some COVID type jokes. Like it was that close. Like I think literally a week later, the shutdown happened. And Kobe had just passed because he came out for Rock and Roll All Night with a Kobe jersey on. So, yeah, I mean, that was probably the stupidest thing I did, was going to a Kiss concert a week. I mean, you got to figure that probably 20% of that crowd had COVID.
They're probably all dead by now.
Yeah. Well, I still am blown away that I never got it. So, did you ever get it?
Yeah, I got it. I might have gotten it twice, but I definitely got it once. I got it once thanks to our good pals Gino Bisconti and all of them at the Funny Stop, and we all got together. But summer of 2021, and then they said between 30 and 50 people who attended those shows got sick.
I'm scared to mention anyone's name on a podcast because then the Skakel and Mazur, they were talking shit about whoever, and then you got, we are literally you, me, and Ray DeVito, and even Ray has gotten a little bit of shit, I think, for his interview he did. But like you and I are like literally the last two who haven't been ganged up on. I'm waiting for it.
We're like in the balcony just eating popcorn, and every so often they allude to the audience, and then it's like we go back to eating more popcorn.
But the problem is they're going to run out of enemies. So you and I think, are the natural next choices, because they've all kind of, it's like a Royal Rumble, and you and I are like the last two survivors.
Pretty much, yes. Well, yeah, well, no, this is, but I gotta say, we could actually end there here, Earl, and wrap up the podcast. But I really appreciate this. I'd love to have you back on again down the road, and we'll talk some more sports. And I know we'll probably still be doing the football podcast. I don't know when that'll be. I mean, would have been nice to do one this week after the draft, but I guess we'll do so as we head towards the season. But once again, let me pull up your plugs here. Of course, Earl's podcast and Earl's Patreon. Let's go subscribe to Earl over on Patreon right here as I pull it up on the video. If you were watching on the video here on YouTube, and we didn't do anything that I would be docked here on YouTube. We didn't talk about anything bad. So,
well, I will say, and I have to thank Zen's producer. She is my, I guess, my technical consultant. She uploads a lot to my Patreon. So I do think you get good bang for your buck. But if you can't afford it, that's no problem. I get it. It's an expensive, endeavor. Just, I don't know, follow me on Instagram or come to the Comedy Store. That's free. I do try and provide some free entertainment options because I get it. I mean, Ken Mosca pays $20 a month. That's a lot of money. That's $240 a year. So
Ken's a great guy. I actually just talked to him before we did this podcast. He's doing better. He's doing better physically.
Yes. So if you don't sign up for any one of my things, sign up to Ken Mosca. What's his Twitter? Is it Ace Grid?
Yeah, it's locked right now because of the stuff going on.
Okay. See, there's so much going on with the podcast wars. I don't know what was going on. Like, I don't know what I'm not playing dumb. I really don't know what you're referencing. I mean, today, me and my friend Maddie Goldberg, who wrote a brilliant book called Brain Humor, because he had a brain tumor, probably one of the funniest dudes I know. We literally were calling each other. I had 3 screens up at the same time. And he does too. And we're like talking back and forth about, so it's too much for me to keep up with.
It's a lot.
In terms of the feuds and who likes who, and yeah, that's I'm not saying I get no cut of the proceeds, but it's really an amazing book because he had a brain tumor. And if you remember the commercial, he was in a commercial with Dwayne Wade for Nike. So I'd rather just buy Maddie's book than do my Patreon. And ironically, they're the same price. So,
so yeah, if you have $10, subscribe to Earl's cheapest tier on his Patreon, and then you could buy Maddie's book, and you still have 9 cents left over.
but honestly, buy Maddie's book first. Like I think one of the things that saves me, and I know we got to wrap it up, but like since I do okay in the voiceover world and whatnot, like I don't need the money in terms of that's why I don't beg for it. I'm not saying that's not like a subtle dig at anyone else. Am I embarrassed that I only have 10 followers? 100%. Like, you'd think, I've got thousands of fans on Instagram. Twitter's about the same, ironically enough, at 11,400-ish. And only 10 people are like, yeah, he's funny enough where I'll give him my money. That's why I can't fight back when Kevin says, Kevin Brennan has like 950 Patreon members. That's pretty impressive to me.
Oh, yeah.
Chad's got what, a couple hundred, and I have 10.
Mine's not too better, but hey, we're also working people. Like we have work, we have jobs we go to. So this is just like it's a labor of love. It's a labor of love that we do.
I mean, my Patreon and YouTube streams, I thought I just had over 4,000 hours of listeners, just because I've been on YouTube so long, but I guess they changed the dynamics where they're only counting recent videos watched or something. This business is costing me money. I paid for that sign, $492.
Well, go, folks, go subscribe so it makes it all worthwhile that Earl has his neon Earl sign behind him.
I'll plug the business. They didn't give me a cut at all of the Radical Neon. That's with a K. Radical Neon.
Radical Neon.
So if you're a podcaster, if you're looking to spruce up your background, I know I have the worst background in all of podcasting. At least Ray DeVito has like baseball cards or whatever. Radical Neon.
Mine's either a wall or it's my blinds that my cats have mangled up. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many things you could make fun of. I can't really fire back, Yeah, I've got 10 Patreon members. Fuck you. So hopefully that you stay for the sign. But thank you, Tony. You're the best. You've always been cool. And I know we're caught in we're at the mid-court of the wars. So, hopefully we evade or avoid the shrapnel.
Yeah, we're like safe away, like on the other side of the river, watching the wars go on. So we still have our bayonets, but we're just hanging out.
I'm just waiting because I have a lot. See, you're a man of mystery to a degree. Like, I'm pretty. There's a lot to be made fun of with me if you go on my Instagram. The shirtless pictures, my comedy videos on YouTube that literally get 100 views. So I'm scared when either Kevin or Chad lock in on me because I really will have no comeback. Yeah, you don't like my YouTube video with 63 views? So
here, check out Earl with his shirt off, or him puking in front of John Heater and bench warmers.
Well, that's why I thought that was my first video I ever put up, and it got like 100,000 views. So I cracked the algorithm with my first video, and I just thought, I'll just do some of that, and I'll just get 100,000 views for every video. And I think the last live stream I did talking about hockey got 64 views. So I don't know what I'm doing.
Just plugging away. But Earl, I really appreciate this. Next time we're out in LA, we're gonna have to get together, whether I see you in the belly room or the comedy store. We just go hang out and we'll talk some more wrestling and 80s bad guys.
Come on the couch. We'll talk Sid Vicious. I feel like Ray now. Here's my my giant robot doll. This is a very obscure Japanese TV show. Yeah, we'll do a live stream from this area right here, and we'll set the whole universe, the podcast universe. We'll give them an hour of new material to come after us.
That'd be great. And if anybody else is listening that just stumbled upon this, I have a Patreon too. It's patreon.com/Tony Mazur. $3 a month is my audio only tier. And then I have video and all that. So, but you don't have to. But I appreciate you folks who did listen to this podcast. And thank you, Earl Skakel. Thank you, everybody, for checking this out on the Check Your Brain podcast. My name is Tony Mazur. And thanks. I'll talk to you next week with more fresh, free content for you. Bye now.